Caveat, I'm not a radial arm saw expert, but I use one in the shop a lot. I've had mine for as long as I can remember that I had a shop. I had a radial arm saw, and it was something I was interested in. So, but the knowledge I have is just from my experience working with it and some research that I did for the class. So if you have anything to add, feel free to add to it. But anyway, my baby is GR. It's a 14-inch saw. I bought it back in '08 for about $600. It's a 3 horsepower, and around 2010 I had to have the motor rebuilt for $300. So I got about $900 in it.
When was it manufactured?
1949. This is the plate on it. That serial number. I have several publications that I printed out for both mine and Rob's saw. One is the manual. You can get the manual for any DeWalt saw. And you can get the manual for most other radial arm saws online now. That's kind of nice, and it's for free. So it's pretty neat to be able to go get the manual. I didn't get the manual when I got the saw.
With vintage tools?
Yeah. Old machine.
Yeah. Old Woodworking.
Yeah, something like that.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. Well.
Yeah, very nice site, by the way. So I printed off the manual.
Originated in Americus, Georgia, I think it was. Keith Rucker.
Yeah. And then, like I said, it's got a 18-inch cut across, which is nice. On that same site, I went and there's a little bit of history stuff on the site I thought was very interesting. And also, they have a place where you can take the serial number and figure out about what year on the DeWalt saws anyway. I found on Sears saw it doesn't work that way. Apparently they're not sequential. There's not a big pattern for a Sears saw that I know of where you can figure out the date. I was told the date stamped on the motor, but Dad and I could not find, or Dad couldn't find the number on there.
My serial number has the date right in it.
Oh, it does? Where is it in the?
Well, I know part of the serial number is a 73. And that means it was manufactured in 1973.
Okay, well I've got Dad's.
Craftsman or what?
Craftsman.
Okay.
Craftsman, yeah. I couldn't figure that out online, but that's interesting to know because we're a little bit questioned about what the age of Dad's is. But also I thought kind of neat online was I was able to go to the 1949 advertisement for the saw. And I thought that was pretty cool.
How much over, how much more did you pay than you should have paid for it? What were they selling it for?
Oh, yeah. Back then, I don't have a price for mine. I do have a price for Rob's, but I don't know how much mine would have ran. But I want to finish up on my saw. I set my saw up so I have 6 feet to the right of supported table, and I got 14 feet in case I can put like a support on the end if I need to go that long. I never need to go that long, but and then to the left I've got 9 feet that's supported. Part of it's my shop smith, which I never use for anything anymore, but I don't have the heart to get rid of it. And 12 feet's possible, but I can move those shelves out of the way and get even further than that. I can get all I need in there. And then this is Dad's saw. His was, I think, we figured about 72, 75, somewhere around there. Bought it at Sears liquidation store on Beaufort Highway. Is that right?
Yeah.
The yoke was broke on it.
No, it was just loose.
It was loose, and you had a new one sent to him under warranty. And I put it together, but it's an excellent cutting saw.
Ricky, I bought mine in '76 and it looks just like that.
Yeah, it's made by Emerson, yeah. Really good saw. There are some better Craftsman saws. Some are better than others. The older saws from the 60s and early 70s are widely regarded to be much better saws.
And there are reasons for that.
Yeah. And then his has a 16-inch reach across. He's able to cut 16 inches. That's, this is Rob's.
I've got a saw like that. It's controlled electronically.
Yeah, I've seen those.
It goes up and down and so.
Yeah, yeah. This is Rob's saw. Looked in the serial number from it, and it is MB model is. I'm gonna pass these around if y'all want to look at them. It's pretty interesting, some of the advertising on there and everything. The MB is from '56. This particular one is from '56. They made that model for several years. I'll pass around the manual for it as well. And I'm kind of a bit of a history buff, so I found some advertising from '56. They have quite a bit of advertising from '56. They have, take a little time to look through it. It's pretty fun to look at. But actually, we do have a price list from '56. We'll see. I don't have the C. I have the E. The closest thing I have is the E model. Where did I see it? Oh, here it is, second page.
Ricky, with the conversation on price, do you have any information from Wolf Machinery current?
From who?
Wolf?
No, I don't. No, I don't.
Well, for the real DeWalt's, and Ricky's is kind of the baby of that bunch, you can buy a rebuilt DeWalt, which has the real DeWalt carriage, and most of them are going to be three-phase. 5 horse was the common size, but those will run you about $5 grand. Now they're dead accurate, unlike the later saws.
Yeah. Oh, dog, I saw the price earlier and I can't seem to find the price.
I think he's saying yours is not dead accurate.
On the advertisement that I printed out, I noticed it had $249 on it. I don't know if that was the real price that he got it for, but I think the advertised price was $329, something like that. So he. Anyway, there's the manual for it. This was after AMF bought DeWalt. I'll go over some of the history.
Black & Decker was before or after that? I don't remember.
After, yeah. I got some information on that. We'll cover that. All right, Ray DeWalt invented the radial arm saw in 1922. They called it the Wonder Worker because it was able to do so many cuts, they claim. It could rip, and you'll see in the advertisement all of the things that they claimed it would be able to do. It was formed a company in '24, and they reorganized as DeWalt Incorporated in '47. I'm assuming that they went public. Is that what that means? But and then later on, they were bought by American Machine Foundry, or AMF, which is also the same company that bought Harley Davidson for a while there, in '49. And then back in 1960, Black & Decker bought it. And of course, they've been bought out several times. But technically speaking, Black & Decker still owns the DeWalt line, consumer line. But the industrial line was sold to Original Saw Company in '89, and they still own it. They own the rights to it. Okay, why have a radial arm saw? It's widely considered not as accurate as the newer sliders, and that's why you see so many of them for sale now. The slider offers a lot more flexibility, and a radial arm requires a lot more dedicated space because it's not portable like a slider. I want to submit to you that the radial arm offers some advantages over a slider. The first thing is the market's full of them. Right now you can go on Craigslist, and I've got a little link here. We'll go look and see what's on there today. But they're at a fraction of what their original cost, especially when you're looking for a commercial or a heavier saw. Like I bought my saw for technically $900 after I got all the money into it. Like you said, that saw is about between $5,000 and $6,000.
Yeah. Well, the difference, and this is probably more of a comment on society than it is on saws, the old ones would run darn near forever.
Yeah.
And they could be rebuilt. These things, the sliders, and I've got one, I'm cutting flooring with it right now, but they're throwaway saws.
They are, that's correct. I don't believe in, 49 to today, I don't believe you'll be having that slider 60 some odd years, 70 some odd years later. Okay, and then there are some cuts that you just can't do on a slider, and we're going to talk about that more later on. And also a dedicated, well-adjusted radial arm with a saw station thought out. It's a lot faster in production-wise, and you can produce excellent quality if you set it up right. I just wanted to show that later as we go along. What we're going to look at is we're going to look at what you would look for if you want to buy a used saw. And even if you're going to buy a newer Craftsman or whatever, they're still usable saws. It would be more of a rough cutting saw. How to set up the saw, we're going to go through some of that. Some safety parts of things to consider when you want to use the saw safely. And things to consider incorporating it into the shop to make it a more useful tool, and some tips that I've learned over the years. And I'm hoping that some of y'all can add some too. I was going to kind of go through all the parts of the saw, but I really don't want to do that because I don't really talk about anything except for 3 or 4 parts. And we'll just look at this saw to see those parts. Really, what we're going to be talking about is the arm of the saw. I mean, not the arm, the column, yes, couldn't think of the word. This is the track arm of the saw. The carriage is this assembly, and the yoke, which is what holds the motor, and of course the motor, the arbor. That's really all we need to know about. Of course the table, and underneath the table there will be some kind of adjustment area to make the table flat to the carriage. Okay, things to consider. I put price, but that's with a little bit of caveat. But when you do go look at Craigslist and see what you want to buy, you really want to consider perhaps buying a better quality saw and taking into account what it used to cost, and trying to maybe be worth the effort to spend a little extra money to get a better quality saw. And also you might want to consider when you, say if you want to buy a cheaper saw, the saw blade is going to cost you $100. So that's part of the deal.
That's for the small saws.
Yeah. My 14 I think was 169, I believe it was, but it lasts forever. That 14, that's the same one I bought originally. I've had it sharpened once. I don't even think it needed sharpening then. Some Craftsman saws also have a recall on them, and Dad had trouble with first going online, but that is still in effect. You can still get the recall parts for it. It comes with a new table, blade guard, and a new handle. Not really sure why it gets the handle, but Dad's handle is awesome, but it's part of the recall. And also, you might want to consider what you're going to use it for. And in my case, I build cabinets and flat work, so I actually wanted a little bit of a longer carriage feed, and I wanted it to be very, very accurate. So I went out there looking for a good quality saw. It's really good for cutting rough lumber. Most of the lumber that I use is, sawmill lumber, rough cut. And a rough cut actually does but works a lot better with a stronger saw. That was the problem I had. I had a Craftsman for years and years. It was probably from the mid-80s. It wanted to climb up on the cut, and if you have any stress in the wood, it really wanted to climb up on the cut because there's a little bit too much flex in the arm, and it was underpowered for what it needed to do for a 10-inch saw. It would work better with an 8-inch blade. It would cut pretty accurately if you stayed on it. If you ever changed the blade, you had to check the accuracy again. Dado blades don't really require a higher horsepower. You can get a Dado blade for this because it's usually a smaller blade than what the saw was designed for. But if you're going to use it for Dado, you want it to be really accurate. So if you go to a lighter saw and it's not cutting your Dado straight, you're shooting yourself in the foot. So if you really want to do Dado work, I would also look for a better quality saw. And if miter or bevel cuts are important to you, I would consider getting what they refer to as a turret or double overarm style, because it's easier to change it, and you get everything stays above the table. On that style, if you have all the way to 45, it wants to run off the end of the table unless you have it, extended quite a bit. But the turret style, you can keep all of the cuts in the middle of the table, still use your stops and that sort of thing. One thing, make sure the saw that you're purchasing, you'll see some radial arm saws out there really cheap, like a 14-inch, and it'll be like $400. Wow, what a deal! And they won't mention anything about it being three-phase. And it's not a deal breaker because you can work with three-phase. It's just going to cost you some more money. And once you get three-phase, then you can buy other three-phase saws and stuff like that, and you're in business because you can find three-phase stuff very reasonable, and usually it's better quality.
You can actually convert it to single phase, three phase.
Not so much convert it, but use a rotary converter.
Yeah.
You're saying convert the electricity. That's right. Yeah. You don't really convert the motor.
No.
There's no way to rewire it. So. Also, look for the general appearance. Does it look like it's sat out in the rain and rode hard and put up wet? You're just asking for trouble later. It's just, you can kind of tell with a saw. A lot of times you can see them and they don't even look like they've ever been used. Mm-hmm. Check the arbor threads for rust, or if they're cross-threaded. These are reverse threads, and people don't get it till it's too late trying to put it on with an impact wrench. Why is this thing not going on there and the whole thread's messed up? That's a deal breaker because that's the motor. Does it have all the pieces like the taber and arbor nut? Some of these are from 1956. I don't know if you can still buy the arbor nut brass. What do you think? I don't know. Reverse thread?
Original and Wolf would have them.
Maybe, yeah.
Now, what they want for them is
Yeah.
another question.
I would imagine that brass nut's in the neighborhood of $80.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
You could probably, maybe sit close to Mickey, and Mickey might be
Yeah.
able to.
Or you could go visit someone that has a radial arm saw. Okay. And is the stand included? I mean, most of us guys, woodworkers, we want to build our stand. But they come often with metal legs, and that might be important to you. For a saw like mine, a 14, it comes with a massive stand, and you kind of need that stand. So if you see a big giant saw with no stand, you got your job ahead of you to get that thing stable.
And you got the table adjusters on yours?
I did not. My stand is good. It had one bent leg on the back, but I was able to straighten that out pretty good, but I did not have the adjusters because I didn't have a table. But it was built into a table that he had, and we just cut it off, but it didn't have any adjusters on it.
They're not hard to make.
Yeah. Well, and I just shimmed it and went away and done with it. All right, and then a missing safety guard to me is a deal breaker. Setup procedure. All right, I'm going to kind of go through it here and go over there, and we'll talk about it some more over there because I don't know if I'm going back and forth. We'll go through it real quick. First thing you want to do is raise the arm up so you can clear the blade. And you want to inspect the column while moving the arm down to see that the movement's smooth on the column. We want to make sure that this column moves in this clamp holder here. So what you do is go up and see that it does move. Sometimes the threads get so rusted on this that it won't move at all. Oh, did I unplug it? Okay. So if you go up and it looks pretty smooth, it's not completely rusted up, that's one of the things you want to look for. And as you're coming down, to make sure it's adjusted right, it should come down smoothly. If it comes down and it doesn't move and then it jerks and moves, you can probably get that out with a little lubrication and stuff, and that's notorious on a Craftsman. So to kind of overcome that on a Craftsman, for sure, start low, come up, and that be the end of your adjustment. And then it won't move on you, especially if you're doing dados. Okay. I'll clean it off and put a little light machine oil. I just use gun oil because I have gun oil all the time. All right, and if you're moving up and down, if you're able to take the saw and just do like that, and there's a lot of loose motion in the column, you can tighten it up here and it will take a lot of it away. But if the column is not straight or whatever, and this is tight and you're still able to move it, then the column's probably bent. So it's just not worth messing with. This, it keeps it from going back and forth like that. This bolt right here goes against a piece of metal that locks that little shaft right there in. Okay, so if your saw has that adjustment, most of them don't. They just use the clamps to hold it in place. Craftsman, the later models don't. DeWalt's are really nice saws. All right, cool. We want to slide the carriage back and forth. It should move easily enough. Should move easy enough. If it doesn't, then you're going to have to check your bearings. Let me get this. It has one bearing that's a soft bearing, it looks like, and one bearing that's a hard bearing. I guess they were trying to smooth it up. So if you pull the carriage all the way out, whoops, not all the way out. He's got quite a bit of buildup right there. That's not a soft, that's just grease buildup. So if we take some WD-40 or something like that, you see that's going to come off. And that'll smooth it up quite a bit. So you would take some mineral spirits or whatever and clean that grease that's in there out of there. You don't want to use grease in there in the first place. Just light machine oil is all you need. And that'll probably loosen that up quite a bit. If it doesn't, you can replace these bearings. All right, so if you take mineral spirits and maybe even some steel wool, I'd be kind of gentle with steel wool because it's cast iron, it's going to go away if you take it too much. But if you have to get really aggressive, a little steel wool with mineral spirits on it will do it. Mine actually did have to do that. I had to get a little after it had some rust in it. All right, so you clean up the bearings. It's got a set on the front and a set on the back. The ones on the back, if you just take your steel wool and push it backwards while you hold your steel wool against the bearing, it's easy to clean it. Okay, if you pull it forward and have the steel wool against the bearing, it's going to pinch your finger.
It will pinch your finger.
Big time. Same thing on the back, but you're going to pull forward while you're holding the steel wool on the bearing, and it'll clean it up pretty good. Mine were in pretty bad shape when I bought it, but they're perfect now. This is a look at mine. It's a more standard bearing. That is a standard bearing. You can buy that bearing.
Is that what you're talking about?
That's a DeWalt
Yeah,
carriage.
yeah. And it's cast, the arm is cast.
And what, there's 4 bearings on the
Yeah,
small
there's,
saw?
yeah.
They
There's
go
2
to
on the front, 2
6.
on the back.
They go to 6.
Yeah. Mine doesn't have 6. So.
The telltale on those, with heavy use, the carriage works on the back of the saw, to the back of the table. It's rarely extended all the way out.
Right.
And you have to check them to see what kind of wear you got to get good accuracy out of them. I have a GA and a GE, and they're standard length saws. They're only 24-inch cuts. They made a long arm.
I just wanted to show a picture on the inside. I cleaned up the rails for the bearings, but you can see that in a cast saw, they will eventually, I would assume, wear out, but it's lasted 70 years. I suspect it'll last long after my son's gone.
Is there another set of bearings on the back
Yes,
side of this?
yes there is. I got a picture of it.
And then the largest
That's the ones
saws
on the
is
back.
one behind that.
Yeah. Yeah, there's three rows of them. Okay.
And that's fully adjustable in 3 planes.
All right. This releases it for this way, but this is what we're talking about. Loosen it right there. Pull this handle forward. And where's the stop for it? Oh, right there. Right there on the front. There's the stop. Tilt it like that. And with the blade off, it's got another stop for horizontal like that. Imagine the blade off. All right, then you take your arm, release the arm. First you want to measure it there, the distance between the bottom of the arbor and the table. And what you do is take a block of wood and a piece of paper and slide it on the wood to kind of use as a feeler gauge and try to find the highest point on the table. So just move it. Once you find the highest point, you lower the arm until it just touches that paper, and that's your starting point. Then move it to another position and adjust your table. And underneath here, on this one, it does have adjusters. And all it is a nut that you loosen. I don't know if we can get under there, Dan, or not. Take a slim wrench, and underneath the table it's got nuts that you loosen, and you screw the screws in and out to raise and lower the table. So just keep moving that arbor to different positions on the table to get your four corners all the same height to that arbor. And this is the first step. All right? After you get them nice and clean, and the track's really clean, take your finger and put it against the bearing and move it. If you can stop the bearing with your finger, fairly good pressure, then the bearing, that particular bearing is not adjusted right. You have to move it several times to make sure. You can do that to all four bearings. Now, if it's a 6-bearing carriage, you are going to have to take it out. Otherwise, the only way you would know the bearing's bad is if it's got loose motion. But I guess you could take it out and see if it's got loose motion, though. That makes sense. But if you don't have any adjusters on your table, you can still shim it. And that's what I did. And what I had to pay attention to, though, was once I got it pretty close to where I was, I put a matching shim in there with glue. So it would not move, because the next step will mess you up, because you got to adjust the square of the fence to the arm.
Ricky, along that same line, you were talking about the things on the floor. A lot of times, after you do all your fancy work up there and you get your rails clean and your bearings clean and everything, I mean, that thing should just be moving just so nice and smooth. If your wheels are too much to the front, it's a safety hazard, because you let go of the saw, all of a sudden it's coming to you.
Right. I actually had, and we're going to cover this, but I had a problem with that. It wasn't really tipped that much, but it was enough to clear the fence, which is too scary. So I fixed that, but we take care of that. On mine, the adjustment is, there's where you release it like you do here. Go to the next slide. There, I'm taking the blade off. I don't have a wrench to hold the arbor in place. You don't want to put a piece of wood right there and you try to loosen the blade, because it's going to tip up and put stress on this arm. So the only thing I figured to do is bring it all the way out to the end. I just do clear the end of my table with the saw blade, and I put a piece of wood under the front of it, and it doesn't seem to stress that arbor. There was a bolt that went into the end of the arbor. I guess that's how you used to hold it, because there's no slots on mine. There's slots on this one.
That's flat only.
There's a little flat on the back side. I don't know what to do with that wrench. Oh, here it is. There's a flat right there to hold the arbor on this one so that you can loosen the blade. Also remember that nut is reverse thread. And if it's brass, you can turn it off very easily, especially with a 1 5/8" wrench. Doesn't take much torque with a 1 5/8" wrench to screw up a brass nut. So most of the time I use an impact wrench with a 1 5/8" socket to take it off. But I never use that to put it on. I always use the wrench to put it on so I can feel the torque. You know, it's brass. And I don't want to be trying to find one of those suckers. In my case, I cannot turn my arbor to the table. I guess my saw predated their instructions because that big giant power cord there is right into the back instead of into the end, and that big cord won't let me clear the yoke. Okay. I did that by measuring with a stick, a story stick, and just moving it to different positions and measuring with a story stick and finding a high position, and once again adjusting the table that way. I have done this years and years ago. It's dead ass on. I want to show the next slide. You can't tilt your stick, but you can just keep waving it back and forth until you get the lowest point. And if it matches your mark, you're good to go. That works just fine. My table is dead flat. First thing you want to do is, I have a 4-foot straight edge ruler, is lay it against your fence and make sure that your fence is straight all the way across, and especially on both sides of the cut. And in my case, I have a long table, so I take an 8-foot extruded aluminum straight edge I use with my skill saw to cut plywood, and I just check it for the full length, including my radial arm. You can see my straight edge there on that end. Next slide. And it goes both all the way the length of the table. So my arm is actually a piece of 2-inch metal tubing because I didn't want it moving, and that was there when I bought it. I just kept the tubing. It seemed to work fine. All right, then you want to choose a tooth on your blade, because you're going to have a little bit of run out on your saw, maybe. On a 14-inch saw, mine does. It has a little run out. But I choose a tooth on that saw and take a framing square against the fence and adjust. Let me get on the other side so that the camera can get it better. Adjust the blade and come on down with the wrong way. Pretty fine thread on that thing, huh? Seems to turn good though.
And notice in your instructions here, use an accuracy verified framing square. Is that an accuracy verified framing square?
It was until winter.
This certified.
All right, first thing I want to do is get my detent here. Where is it? Right here. No, right back there. Right there is your 90-degree lock is on the back side back here at the arm. It's just like mine. Until you're pretty good right there. Tighten it down with that lever. All right, so we're at 90 degrees supposedly. I actually lock in my framing square when I get the tooth there. Just hopefully that it's not this way when I come out. But my style is perfect, so I wanted to verify it that it was. So you want to be able to move so that the arm, when you move it, it's not going to move your framing square. You hear that scrape all the way across? That's pretty straight. But healing is when either the back side is kicked out and you're coming straight across like that. So when you make your cut, in this case the left side will be hitting the back of the teeth, and you can see it in the cut when you have that. Of course it can be the other way too, but also it has a horizontal capacity to it because it could be like that. So it has a horizontal healing setting and a vertical healing setting. Okay, get an idea what that means? Okay.
Toe in and toe out.
I'm sorry?
Toe in and toe out.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, like on a car, sort of. Yeah.
Dynamic balancing on the top.
Okay. On my saw, this was, although it adjusts easy, it takes a while to get it adjusted. But this is a little jig that I saw a video on. When I adjusted my healing, I actually did it with a straight edge, kept moving the blade, and did the best I could just by putting a framing square against the side of the blade, not hitting a tooth, and get it like that. You can get pretty close like that. Close, very close actually. Because when I went through this process with my saw, it was amazingly close. So that worked pretty good. We're going to take this and attach it to the table. If the table was longer, it would be a little better. And we're going to bring it up until, it's a little bit long, but until we just scrub on one part of the blade on this side. Okay? It'll make a sound. We'll have a sound in a second. And then you pull it back to the other side. Oh, and you mark a tooth there to know where it's hitting your guide. Then move it to the other end of the blade till you have the same sound. And if that sound is where you have your mark, then you don't have healing in the vertical plane. Okay? In the horizontal, and do the same thing using that as your measurement guide. We're not going to do that. It'll take forever to get the arm moved. But do the same thing. And the adjustments made, let's go through my saw first. Go down some. All right, there's me trying to do it on my saw. There's where the teeth are hitting. I put a mark. Next. and then on the other side, I was hitting the same mark on the other side. I didn't have to move my vertical plane at all. The way you adjust it, it's those two little set screws at the top there hold two bolts that are coming from the end. You see on the bottom screw, or the bottom slide, there's screws that are on the inside, Allen wrench screws, that you adjust it on the vertical that direction. But one thing about this saw, it's set up so that he can do miters really easily. See the blades way behind the fence? That'll make your adjustments for the miters nice. On my saw, I'm sorry? On my saw, it's set up just for crosscut, and I'm just clearing that blade with the fence. That gives me as much crosscut as possible because I don't ever use it for miter.
Now, is that considered a turret saw or not?
No, not a turret. Turret would have an arm, and below it would be a second arm. And for miters, the second arm's what turns for your miter, so that your miters stay over the middle of your table.
Who made a turret saw?
Oh, that's primarily the saw you can buy now. And most all of them are turret now, aren't they? Yeah, very few old post type saws. To me, mitering just was not important to me. I just don't do that much mitering, and I have a chop saw on the end of my table, so it takes care of 80% of what I need to miter. On my saw, since it is set up for crosscut only, if you take this and slide it up, it hits the blade. So you have to be aware of that. But I very rarely cut 2-inch, and if I do, all I have to do is put another board behind it, and I'm clear of the blade. Okay? So you always have to check that. All right, let's flip it on. Cut pretty good. All right, we got to cut. We're going to take one side and flip it over and slide the boards together. They're not even close.
Still tilted.
If you should see nothing there but the look of the cut. You're tilted and we're cooking. Well, we're actually pretty straight. We're just tilted. Safety. All right, here we go to safety part, you guys. My number one tool, and it don't matter about any tool in the shop, is make sure your family and your loved ones know to not interrupt you while a machine's running in the shop. You got to beat it into them. They have to do that. If you're right-handed, try to set your cuts up so the good side's on that side. Just let that be your normal practice. Right hand on the handle, and this hand at least 6 inches away from the blade, holding against the fence. Again, everything's dependent on that fence holding it, because the blade's giving it down force a little bit, back force a good bit. Okay? So just pull like that. And if you have to do it on that side, pull like that. Okay? None of this. Okay? Got it? Nowhere in between 6 inches on this side or on this side, and the rule of thumb is nowhere in the cut path. But my cut path's 18 inches, so I do measure across my cut path. But all right, this is where we're talking about the blade again. It has to have a negative angle or low angle teeth, no more than 15 degrees. My reading showed 15 degrees, but rarely do I see even a positive angle on a radial arm saw teeth blade anymore.
It'll come after you.
Yeah, but a forest is negative angle. I think it's 6. Make sure it's installed correctly. If you put this blade in backwards and try to cut a board, Lord help you, is all I can say. It's going to be exciting for a few minutes there. When you turn the saw on, listen for the blade. You want it to come to full speed before you even start to move the carriage, because you want that motor running in its sweet spot. And the momentum of the blade to help make the cut, especially for a Dado blade. The dado blade takes a little while to get up to speed. Even on my saw, it's a 10-inch dado blade. There's a lot of momentum in that dado blade when it's spinning. Know where this cutoff switch is. On this saw, it's in a terrible place. It's right on the side of the saw. So if you have a problem, you've got to reach across the blade to get to it. That's my paddle switch. I actually did not have it until I started doing the research for this class. And I kept saying over the years, I said, I've got to rig that up, I've got to rig that up. And I thought, no better time. We're going to do it for this class. So,
What's your switch behind it?
I'm sorry?
What's the switch behind it?
Yeah, it's just a contact switch, the old DeWalt
In and out?
switch. Yeah, push button on the bottom. I think it's a magnetic switch, I believe. But anyway, see the little dowel pin? The dowel pin is into the wood on the back side there, and it just pushes the off button off. Works beautifully. Once you finish the cut with the carriage, there's no reason for you to bringing it all the way out to the end. Once it exits the cut completely, remember you got that little bit at the very bottom, then push your carriage back to the position. Okay? Let the blade come to a complete stop before you get these little pieces that are on the end. None of this. Okay? Take whatever you just cut off and move it out of the way. Make sure the saw has either a spring back or it's tilted to the back, or in this case, you got to forcefully pull it out that the carriage doesn't drift out here and catch something, take off, gone home. Okay? Next slide. And way I did not have that, I had to rig something up. So I just rigged up a pulley on the wall there. It's got just an eye hook into the wall. You see I missed the stat on the first one. Thing is attached to the bolt that holds the yoke there, and with a little metal tab there, and the rope goes over that pulley, and there's a weight. It took a while to get the right amount of weight so that I didn't have to fight it, but it would go back on its own. If I would release it at the end of the cut, it would slowly go back. Let the saw blade determine the cut. If you've got your race and everything cleaned up nice and it's rolling nice, you can feel a little back pressure against it when the saw blade's doing the work. And let that be your determiner. Of course, they're designed to cut on the pull stroke, not like a slider. You start out here and push it back. Clamp very short pieces. I have on my saw, I wish I put a picture there, but there's lock channels on the top, and I have a toggle push that I can put on there and hold that down. For round stock, of course, you've got to clamp it down because it'll want to just spin it. Try to anticipate stresses in crooked lumber. This is particularly important for me because I do cut a lot of rough lumber. And in my case, the first step for me in all of my projects with solid is to cut it to length, approximate length. I usually give it, depending on how wide the piece of wood, either from 3/4 of an inch to 1.25 inches of extra length to be able to square it back up when I get through with squaring the wood. So a lot of times what I cut's not straight. If you do have a bowed piece of lumber, say, can imagine this being bowed like this, you want to turn the bow against the blade. So that if you turn it the other way and it's bowed like this, as soon as it starts to get close to the end of the cut, it's going to want to slam it against the fence. So you can do it. It doesn't have to be straight lumber. You just have to think about what you're doing. All right, these are some ideas for setup considerations. We already talked about having a longer cut capacity if you have a dedicated cross cut and you're not wanting to do miters, because I can move this saw back another, looks like 1.25 inches, and have that much more capacity on the saw. It looks like it's got maybe 12 inches maybe. And that'll give me a little over 12 inches, if that's important to you. It's much easier to keep it square if you're not going to those stops. I prefer just to keep everything as accurate as I could possibly keep it for my work. Keeps the table cleaner. You don't have all these weird cuts into the table. when you're trying to slide wood on it, it makes it turn harder to slide it. And there's a good way to do miters anyway, in my opinion, if they're short enough, is to use a jig. This jig, of course, is set up for my saw. I don't even think it'll reach it. It won't. But that's the way you set the jig up. You will need a pretty strong dust collector to be able to collect for a radial arm. That's my dust collection box. Measurement stops is absolute best thing about a radial arm, in my opinion. If you're going to use stops, you don't have to buy a stop. You can use a piece of wood. You just got to clamp it to the table. But if you do that, don't clamp it so that it's right against the table, because when you bring up a board to it, every time you make a cut, you're pushing sawdust right in that little corner there, okay? So make sure if you're going to use a board for a stop, you come up some to allow your sawdust to go. Every time you slide over, you're pushing the sawdust underneath your stop. Oh, aftermarket stops. All right, go back to that slide. Let me read that off real quick first. The thing I like about aftermarket, we'll have a picture after this, is you can flip them down and they don't want to collect dust at all because it's way away from the fence. There's no way it's going to collect. You can take them off temporarily and keep that measurement. All you got to do is flip it up. And then if you want to go back to that measurement, just flip it back down. You don't have to pull your tape measure out anymore. I have some stops that are sitting there that are never going to get moved. And they're like for the height of my cabinets, my kitchen cabinets. So you can buy a bunch of stops. Several presets can be set for common cuts. That's what I was talking about there. I use sticky back tape to set up the stop. Once you get it, your saw set up, you're happy with it, you don't think you're going to move it anytime soon, you can put a measurement on there, cut it, make sure it's perfect, and then use your sticky back and a reference point, and you don't have to pull your tape measure out anyway, unless you want to be 64th accuracy. And it's absolutely the fastest option to make accurate multiple cuts. Go to the next slide. This is what I was talking about. I use that's my straight edge, which is sitting right against my bandsaw, waiting for me to take it this morning. But you can see I set the measurement and then set my sticky back tape on the back, and you can see it won't collect dust. The only problem with this one now, you're going to have about 1.5 inches to be able to hit that stop. It doesn't do 1 inch square stuff, but you can fix that too. Okay, and these are some non-typical uses like dado cuts. I do use my dado a good bit. You have to make absolutely sure your setup is right, because if you have healing, of course your dados are not going to be straight edge. It's a fast way to make dados. You can do tongue and groove if you don't want to worry about the non-typical thickness of plywood, and it's a fast way to make tenons. That's what it looks like on the saw. I had several people ask me how did I do those angled tenons. I just wanted to show you real quick the jig I used. All I've got there is a straight edge on the line that I had drawn on the back side when I made the first dados for the baby bed. Put the piece up there and drew the lines and did the angle cuts like that through that. That's with it set up on the other side. That's what it looks like when it's made to cut. Go next one. That's just what a dado looks like when you first start. Okay. Rip cuts, wouldn't recommend it. It was sold as part of the deal with the saw, especially the craftsman craze. Everybody wanted a saw that would do everything. It's even more scary than cross cuts. Yeah, absolutely.
Your friendly manufacturer told you could do it, and if you do, you're a fool.
Yeah, and you're braver than I. But it absolutely must have a piece of material that was in this hole. It's a riving knife with kickback paws in it. If you don't have that, don't even think about it. It must be fed against the blade, and you got to definitely have a push stick, and of course you got to have a fence long enough to make it worth to be able to do it. Next one.
The board buddies do work.
Yeah, that's mentioned though.
The direction's really important. If not, you can put a 2x4 through the neighbor's garage door.
Absolutely.
It'll come out.
It's a fast method for straight lining lumber though, which it does work for that. I have done that. It must be made to remain
You
clear.
might mention the feed direction if you ever do a rip cut.
Yeah,
It's critical.
yeah. When you feed it on a rip cut,
Oh, yeah.
the blade has to be going down through the wood. Don't come from the back side of the wood.
You're going the wrong
The
direction.
blade's going down through the
Well,
wood.
that'll snatch it out of your hand, is what it do.
I just wouldn't recommend doing it. I mean, there's just much better ways to do a rip cut. Next. Non-typical uses, there's a whole bunch of them in those handouts I sent, but right, there's a few of the things listed. I'd never had the need for any of them. I don't really see why you would do that. I like to keep my table slick so I can move it, but my fence has sticky back sandpaper on it. Because once it gets where I want it, I don't want it going anywhere else. Before you do a whole bunch of multiples, I verify that first cut and make sure it's still cut and square. Nothing like buying $60 plywood. The 1/8 of an inch below the cut line is plenty, and it does help a little bit with tear out if you don't go too much deeper than that, but you're going to have tear out. You can make zero clearance inserts, but I'd never found it to be that helpful because it tears it right out anyway. Go next. Arbor nuts are reverse threads. Brass nuts ain't cheap. They're soft for a reason because arbors are even more expensive. You have to get rid of the saw. Talk about the impact socket and the wrench thing I already mentioned. Next. Incorporate the saw. Consider incorporating your miter saw in line with it. Next picture. And there's what I've got set up. And I do love that. That works really well. Next. Rough cut, I already talked about that. It's a great option, I think, in today's market because you can get very good quality saws for a good price. This is, I consider a medium quality, but still a pretty good saw though. Any tool can be dangerous if you use it improperly. A radial arm saw is probably one of the more unforgiving. You can take your whole arm off with a radial arm very easily. It does require some occasional tune-up and to remain safe and effective. Dados, I love Dados for it. It's a very, very fast saw for doing multiples. Like if I'm cutting a whole kitchen, I can cut every one of my sides in 20 minutes. I don't care how many of them I got. Thanks, guys. Sorry to run out. Appreciate it.